Uh, it was just last year. Heather and I took a trip to Malta to go visit Jacob while he was on his break. And while we were there, Heather and I decided to take a trip to the capital of Malta, which is Valletta. And it was very interesting because as we, prepared for the trip, we didn't have a rental car. I would have been terrified to drive on the wrong side of the road. And can you then turn left on a left red? What are the rules then? I think I would have been totally lost. So Heather and I relied upon the bus system. And, getting there was a little bit of a challenge, but we got to our place. And then where I mapped it out, I'm like, okay, we're going to, for the bus line, the nice part is Valletta's the capital. All buses lead to Valletta. So we just got to get on this bus, and we're going to take it, and it says to the end of the line. And so we're like, okay, this is great. So we just kind of sat down, and we're riding the bus, and people are getting on and off. And I could tell that we're getting close to the end. The bus stops, you can do the countdown, and we're in stop 4, we're stop 3. And all of a sudden, at stop 3, the bus pulled over at stop 3, and literally everyone on the bus started getting off. And I had a quick little panic attack. Does everyone know something that I don't know? Because I thought I was going to take this all the way to stop 1, but everyone is getting out at stop 3. And it was one of those that as people were filing out, we couldn't catch anyone's attention and find out, like, hey, is this Valletta, is this the capital? And so I looked at Heather, and we're like, well, what do we do? And we're like, we're close enough. I mean, if it's wrong, it's no big deal. So we hopped off the bus, and we followed the crowd off the bus. And sure enough, the end of the line is the backside of Valletta, where you board in order to get out of Valletta. Stop 3 gets you off right at the fountains that are at the entrance of Valletta. So that was one where we actually followed the crowd, and for Heather and I, it turned out very well. But it doesn't always work that way, does it? Following the crowd can, in fact, become a dangerous thing. Following any crowd blindly, I believe, is always dangerous. It may not be wrong. You may end up following blindly a bunch of people, and it turns out well for you. But I found that for the most part, blindly following anything only ends up in trouble. Because sometimes we end up following something and doing what everyone else is doing, and not asking the question, is what I'm doing right? We sometimes fall into the trap of, well, I trust the people around me, so I will just follow them. And we turn off our brains, and we suspend our faith, and we just simply follow along. It's New Year's Eve. You're at a party with a bunch of friends. And as you're partying, people are drinking and enjoying themselves, and the countdown begins. 10, 9, 8, and as you're there at this party, it's really sad because your wife is sick, and she can't be there at the party with you, and so you're at this New Year's Eve party just with a bunch of friends, and then as the countdown continues, you start missing your wife is there, and then as it strikes midnight, everyone just starts kissing everyone else. Should you follow along and just start kissing everybody? No. Heather says no. You're at a college party, and you're thinking everyone is trustworthy, and as you start having some things, people say, well, yes, try this brownie, it's very delicious. And everyone else seems to be pretty happy after they eat the brownie. So do you follow along? Let's make it even worse. It's voting season. And it's time to vote for not just the President of the United States, but for all of the other strange, weird ballots, the initiatives on the ballots. You've got to vote for judges, local council people. And do you just simply find a voter's guide that maybe you trust and say, well, whatever they vote, I'll vote? And you just simply check boxes without even knowing. Or you're out at a protest, and as you are protesting, there are other people that are showing up that are clearly they're not for protesting purposes, but for problem purposes. And all of a sudden you realize everyone is rushing into the Target and taking stuff, and you think, there's no cops here. No one's even seeing any of this. All of these people are clearly bad people, and they're going to end up with all the good stuff. So maybe I should jump in and follow along and take. Crowds have a way of making people stupid. Crowds have a way of causing us to turn off our brains and morality to just simply go along with the flow. Now, sure, I will say that there are times that following is a good thing. I encourage youth to follow their parents. Like if their parents are going to church, well, even if you don't like going to church, it's probably a good idea for you to go to church. I encourage, if people are reading their Bibles and posting up on the internet that they are going to start a reading plan and try to read through Scripture, and you want to jump on that, there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's times that following is a good thing. But most of the times, if you blindly follow, it normally doesn't even end up well. So let's say everyone has gotten on the latest Bible study craze and you decide to jump on, not because you want to increase your faith, not because you want to grow, but because everyone else is doing it, and so you're going to just go ahead and tag along with it. Question, is that study going to mean anything to you? I mean, maybe. Maybe not. Maybe you just get frustrated and angry, or even worse, you get a lot of guilt over the fact that you're not doing it well, and you just build up some resentment. We're going to be talking about riots today. At least that's what my heading on Acts chapter 19, verse 23, the riot in Ephesus. Quick reminder, once again, in Ephesus, Joshua, who is the goddess of Ephesus? You don't remember? Artemis. Very good. This is from last week. So if you're, I know, last week was a long time ago. It was like last year. I had to get it in there. That's the dad joke. I get one time to do this every year. So in Joshua, Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, the moon, and virgins, and with that promiscuity as well. So they had a very large temple, and I mentioned this last week. What is the significance of the Artemis temple? See, that's the thing. You don't listen, do you? That's okay. I don't take it personally. The Temple of Artemis is one of the 7 wonders of the world. Huge. It's a massive temple. And so as Paul and the rest of the people, you've got Paul, you've got, who are all the other people that were with them? Other disciples were there. I think some other people started showing up. Anyway, Paul's the main guy, and we're going to find out what's going to happen as some problems start going on. Remember, we're doing this extraordinary living as there was miracles. There was the 7 sons of Sceva. People are burning their scrolls. And so he's getting ready to get out of this time. Verse 23. About that time, there arose a great disturbance in the force, about the way. Sorry, I just watched Mandalorian. Oh, so good. Very, very satisfying ending. I did not get spoiled on it. I won't spoil it for you, but you really do need to watch The Mandalorian. I'm just saying. So there's a disturbance about the way a silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought in no little business for the craftsmen, which it's weird how the construction is. That means he was a mass producer. He provided a lot of work for the craftsmen. He called them together along with the workmen in related trades and said, "Men, you know we receive a good income from this business. And you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large number of peoples here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia." And that's not an exaggeration. Remember, Paul had been there for several years. And so he was talking to people constantly, and it was spreading out this information about Jesus Christ. Now, we don't really have Paul's exact words. We don't have him, though, saying, "Artemis is a fake and a phony. Throw away your shrines and stop following her." I don't know if he was quite that confrontational, but we do know that Paul doesn't shy away from something. So he is saying something akin on Jesus Christ is the one true God, and there are no others. And maybe someone in the crowd raises their hands. Well, what about Artemis? Jesus Christ is the one true Son of God, and there is no other. So eventually people are picking up that Artemis is a fake. And so these people are realizing this is cutting into our profits. And let me tell you, that's a very interesting thing. We all love things until it starts affecting our pocketbooks, right? We all love good causes as long as it doesn't negatively impact us. Who here believes that we should do what we can? We don't debate the details. We should do what we can to help the homeless population in Orange County. I mean, would we all agree with that? I think we would all agree with that. That's a noble cause. So who here is okay with a homeless shelter going up next door to your house? Oh, we're not so excited about that. Well, why is that? Well, because with that comes a lowering of property values, so now my house isn't worth as much. We're going to end up with huge messes. We're going to start talking about safety, and we're not quite as excited. Now, again, please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I understand things like safety and security. We do the same thing here also at Searchlight. But I think sometimes we are quick to support things because it helps us, and we're quick to condemn them because it negatively affects our lives, and it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with our faith. And I think there's times that we maybe need to reevaluate what we follow on how it affects our faith and how it is an expression of our faith, and not just will it make me money or lose me money? Will it cost me time or make me time? Will it provide me with lots of inconvenience, or will it be convenient? So that's what Demetrius and all these other people, they're like, we don't like Christianity, and their sole complaint against their anger towards Christianity is simply that we're losing money because of it. Now, that's how the world operates. And I think we all need to just kind of wake up to that a little bit. That sometimes there are people out there that are hostile to Christianity, not because of the viewpoints of Christianity, not because of what it teaches, but how it affects. True story. When we first started Searchlight, all the way back in the year 2001, we were in a retail strip mall. It was very interesting because in this retail strip mall, we had a lot of other stores that were there. We had, oh my gosh, that was such a long time ago. We had a little boutique, that's right. But the one I remember the most is at the end of the lot, the liquor store. And so we had to file for a conditional use permit, and we had objections to the conditional use permit. One of the objections came from the liquor store saying all these Christians are going to come in and say don't drink alcohol. And then I tried to tell them that we're Lutheran and we're all cool with that and we'll probably come on down and maybe buy some. And then also the city didn't like it because that retail strip mall, that 5,280 square feet that we were renting, we were no longer paying tax. There was no tax revenue to the city on that property. And the city council was like, I don't know if we can support this because we're not getting tax revenue. They weren't hostile to Christianity because of the viewpoints of Christianity. They were hostile to Christianity because it affected their pocketbook. That's a question for all of us too. Are there things that we do or don't do, not because they're right or wrong, but because they cost us? And I would submit that many a times there are going to be events where things are going to cost us, but it's the right thing to do. All right, so they call them together. Men, you know, we receive a good income from this business. Verse 26, and you see how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray a large number of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia. He says that man-made gods are no gods at all. So I don't know if Paul, again, was Paul like, Artemis stinks. She's a poopy god. No, she just probably like, no, she's just not a god. Oh, I just had to start the new year saying poopy. I don't know why. Verse 27, there is danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty. Because, you know, that's how gods work. That if they're not worshipped very well, somehow they lose their divine majesty and cease to become gods. Question, if everyone in the entire world stopped worshiping God, would that mean that God ceases to exist and is no longer a god? No. So his logic is a wee bit flawed. Like, you know, I would have been more impressed with him saying, look, and we all know that Artemis is true and needs to be worshipped, and this guy preaching fake gods is going to lead people astray, and now we're not, but it's not going to do anything to her divine majesty. So when they heard this, they were furious. So the small group is getting riled up, and you know they're freaking out, and so they begin shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!" And soon the whole city was in an uproar. So this is one of those, we've got spirit, yes we do. We've got spirit, how about you? And it's this chant that's it. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. And they're just chanting it. And they're all doing this in this whole uproar. And the people seized Gaius and Aristarchus. Who are these poor guys? Well, they're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And they grabbed them. They're Paul's traveling companions. Where's Paul? Why is Paul not here? Best theory we have is right now Paul is a little under the weather and he's not actually out with the crowd right now. So they grab his traveling companions. They rush as one man into the theater. No, this is not your Edwards Cinemas in Anaheim Hills theater. This theater seats, according to my research, 56,000 people. That's a big theater. When we were in Greece, we didn't make it over to Ephesus, but I'm sure this would have been a wonderful thing. So they're all rushing now into the theater, and then Paul starts hearing that these two guys have been taken up. So Paul wanted to appear before the crowd, but the disciples would not let him. Even some of the officials of the province, friends of Paul, sent him a message begging him not to venture into the theater. So Paul's like, let me go. The disciples are like, no, Paul, you really shouldn't do that. And then even some city officials are like, look, when this riot starts breaking out, you do not want to be at that thing. It is not going to be a pretty sight. The assembly was in confusion, and this is what happens. Because if you've ever seen a crowd gathering, what do you want to do? You want to follow the crowd. You want to see what's going on. And that's exactly what's happening here. A whole group is starting to rush in the theater, and so if you were walking by and everyone's rushing in the theater, you might think to yourself, I need to rush into the theater. But following a crowd blindly doesn't normally end up well. And that's what's happening here. People just start joining in on it because they have the fear of missing out. I know we all have it. I know we all suffer from it. There was one time when Heather and I had taken Mark Thomas to Disneyland. It was a Special Olympics day. And so they had all these wonderful cast members that were taking care of all of these people, Special Olympics, and it was so wonderful. And there came a point when it started to rain, and so we got Mark Thomas a poncho, and but a lot of other special friends decided, we out of here, and they all started bailing. So a bunch of these cast members started searching around for special friends to like help out. So Mark Thomas ended up with, we think, roughly around 14 or so Disney cast members as a little entourage. And while we were there, and I always mess up the name, and I always have to ask Heather, when we were there, all of a sudden Heather looks over and she sees a movie star. A TV star from a drama like Wildwood or Pine something. And she's like, oh, that's the actor from The Thing, and that's so-and-so. And I'm like, oh, okay. And you could kind of tell because he had a couple of cast members with him and his family. And so we walked over, and I think Heather asked for his autograph. And it was really funny because you know what the guy said? He looked at Mark Thomas, and he looked at the 14 cast members around him and said, I think I should be asking you for the autograph. Who are you? And we're like, oh, we're nobody. But that's what happens. We see a crowd gathering. There is a time I saw Kobe Bryant. How did I see him? Not because I saw him. I saw a crowd gathering around him, and everyone was following. Following a crowd blindly often doesn't end well. Following a crowd for the right reasons and for good purposes is good. But oftentimes, we reject our morality and our brain cells to follow the crowd. So, the assembly was in confusion. That's what happens. Some were shouting one thing, some another. So, some dude over here is trying to start the wave to go this way, and this group's trying to, and it's just mass confusion. It's insane. And then I love this line. Most of the people did not even know why they were there. If you are following a crowd and you don't know why you're following it, that's a problem. This is one of the reasons why when we talk to young people, especially around 7th, 8th grade, we start talking to them about the idea that you should not be following your parents' faith simply because it's your parents' faith. There comes a point when you have to say, what do I believe? What am I going to follow? What am I going to trust? What am I going to believe in? Don't follow just because. Don't go to church just because everyone else goes to church. Don't follow a crowd just because. Think. Wonder what's going on. Ask some questions. Don't be a lemming. Oh, that's just good stuff. New year. Let's just say it. Verse 33. The Jews pushed Alexander to the front, and some of the crowd shouted instructions to him. He motioned for silence in order to make a defense before the... Can you imagine standing before 54,000 people and trying to shut them down and without a microphone? Oh my goodness, like, is there sign language or something? Like, I mean, is he doing the whole, hey, I'm trying to hear the play in my helmet, can you please keep it down? Yeah, it's insane. He motioned for silence in order to make a defense for the people, but when they realized he was a Jew, they all shouted in unison for about 2 hours, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. 2 hours. You read some of this stuff, you're like, is that really true? Well, if you've ever been to a football game, yeah, it can't happen. I don't know. Is there other events? I mean, concerts, but you're screaming, but you're not chanting the same thing. 2 hours. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. So finally, the city clerk gets involved. Please, it's not the city clerk like he's got, a little pocket protector glasses and a little calculator. No, this would be a high-ranking official. You might say the chief officer, maybe a mayor or a governor, we would try to say. This person in charge quieted the crowd and gives this incredible speech. It's not from a Christian, but it's intelligent. And this is what I think we need to start doing as Christians. Our arguments should be intelligent. We should be smart with what we say. We should not simply just be followers. We should actually think, have some intelligence. Don't follow something just because someone says it. So he says, men of Ephesus, doesn't all the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of the great Artemis and of her image, which fell from heaven? I could go into a great story of it. What he's saying is, look, Artemis is a god. We're not going to be affected by this because she's awesome and amazing. Therefore, since these facts are undeniable, you ought to be quiet and not do anything rash. Oh, would this be good advice for all of us? But mainly Christians? That sometimes it's good to be quiet, think, and don't do rash things? Even if everyone else is kissing each other on New Year's Eve, even if everyone is eating that yummy edible, even if everyone is drinking at that party, even if everyone is voting this way or that way, maybe you should stop, think, don't do something rash. I think that so many problems in this world can be solved if we just stop doing rash things. You have brought these men here, though they have neither robbed temples nor blasphemed our goddess. This is what makes us believe that, he's not saying Artemis is stupid and dumb. They're just saying Jesus is the only way. So they haven't broken the laws. So if then Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a grievance against the body, the courts are open and there are proconsuls. You can press charges. If there's anything further you want to bring up, it must be settled in a legal assembly. As it is, we are in danger of being charged with rioting because of today's events. In that case, we would not be able to account for this commotion since there is no reason for it. We hear wisdom from someone who is not a Christian, saying rioting, following a crowd, and calling for the death of these people is not smart. It's a reminder of the other riot. A guy who was convicted in court in the middle of the night, deemed to be worthy of the death penalty. And they quickly grabbed him and a couple others and threw them on a cross. And as people walked by, they just kind of shook their heads. When the time of the sentencing with Pilate, what did they do? They got a crowd together, and that crowd started calling for the death of Jesus. And some people just showed up, I'm sure, and said, oh yeah, whoever that guy is, I don't know what he did, but sure enough, why don't you go kill him? And they said, and even Pilate said, he hasn't done anything wrong. And they're like, we don't care, kill him. And if it's wrong, may his blood be on us and our children. And that man ended up dying because of a mob scene and crucified. But there were people there who didn't follow the crowd. There were people there like John who showed up with Jesus' mother. There was a centurion who is beholden to give execution orders, who is beholden to guard the place to make sure it stayed the way it is. But he didn't just follow along and said, well, the guy's on the cross, he must be guilty of something, and he's dying this death. It must have been super serious, so you know what? I'm going to join in on it. No, what he did was he started thinking, and he started looking, and maybe he knew a little bit about Jesus. And he realized this man didn't deserve to die. He shouldn't have been killed. And instead he makes a grand confession. Surely he was the Son of God. I think for all of us, we need to start asking some questions. I'm going to charge every Christian to not follow Christianity because you grew up in it. Follow Christianity because it's right. I know that there's people even in the East Coast, and I've talked to them, and everyone goes to church, and you start talking to them about their faith, and you realize, well, why do you go to church? And they go, because everyone else does also. That's not a good reason to go to church. We go to church because we worship God, because we have faith in Jesus Christ, and we sing his praises. You don't live your life because your parents or your friends or your kids want you to live a certain way. You live that way because it's the right thing to do. And I have always tried to encourage people, if a crowd starts to gather, start asking yourself the question, why? And for what purpose? It might be a noble purpose. It might be to stop injustice. It might be to raise awareness. But it might be also to call for the death of an innocent person. And maybe we need to start thinking more. This year, don't be a follower. This year, don't blindly accept things. Question, ask, be inquisitive, wonder about things. Why do I go to church? Why do I tune in? Why has this been a part of my history? And as you start asking questions, I can guarantee people who are inquisitive always end up finding the truth. And I'll tell you this, my belief is you will be finding Jesus Christ, who is the way, who is the truth, and will ultimately be for your life. Let's pray. Father, forgive us for sometimes being blind followers. Instead, help us to follow Jesus because he is correct. Help us to follow Jesus because he's got truth. Help us to follow Jesus because it's the right thing. Help us, Lord, when we get into crowds or we get into large gatherings, that we don't just simply jettison our faith or our brains, but instead we ask questions and we start thinking and we start wondering, and we live our lives not based on what the crowd wants, but we live our lives based upon what you want. And thank you. Thank you, Lord, that sometimes when we see people who just make total disasters out of their lives, who make horrible choices their entire life, sometimes we just simply say, write them off, not worth it. But you didn't do that. You went against all popular wisdom, all conventional thinking, and instead you reached your hand down into this world and you pulled us up and you rescued us. And Lord, we know that it was our sin that put you there. We know that we were there amongst the crowd chanting for your death, because sometimes, Lord, following you costs us. It's painful sometimes. And we don't want to feel the effects. We like our nice little convenient lives, but instead you've called us to live differently, to think differently, to act differently. to do it because it's the right thing, not because it's the popular thing. And may we, Lord, be able to speak and think and follow, following you, because you will never lead us astray. We thank you in the name of Jesus.